We haven't talked about Mariupol for a long time. Let's zoom into it. Russians have been moving the biggest reserves to Mariupol from Berdyansk. See here, this is Berdyansk. This is one of the biggest Russian-occupied ports on the Azov Sea, and this here is Mariupol. The distance between these cities is about 63-65 kilometers. Russians are trying to move, or have been moving, about 30,000 reserves into Mariupol. Here are some photos of it that tell us a lot. The route from Berdyansk to Mariupol is filled with Russian military trucks. It's a huge traffic jam, a huge convoy. See, this is the reach of HIMARS, so we can see that Russians can only use this narrow stretch of land here to transport all of their logistics and troops into Mariupol. That leaves them only a few roads. We see this road over here. And from Berdyansk there's another one also, this road over here. They have about 2 to 3 roads to transport all of their logistics and troops. Otherwise they might be visited by Saint HIMARS. Another thing is the traffic jam, which resembles the Kievian convoy. Remember that 30 kilometers long Russian military vehicles convoy? Logistics and troops cannot move due to the lack of coordination. Everyone is pushed through these narrow roads at once. Shows that Russian coordination and logistics level has not changed much from the beginning of war. But what does the troop number tell us? The 30,000 troops they have in Mariupol or on the way to Mariupol are not enough to start any kind of huge offensive on a wider front. The offensive could work with these numbers if you push all of these troops into a very narrow stretch of front, but that would result in huge traffic jams and the troop gathering points would be eliminated with Saint HIMARS or drones. These 30,000 troops barely away from HIMARS reach are only enough to bolster the Russian lines if Ukrainians push through somewhere. This is the biggest Russian reserve force in any one place in this war, and it's only barely enough to hold and bolster the line. Definitely not enough to start any kind of big offensive. Now let's go to Bakhmut. Of course, the Russian main offensive is happening in and around Bakhmut. We know that all Russian attacks from the east of the city have failed. Russians have found a very slow success on the north and southern flank of the city, but with huge losses. In these photos we can see Ukrainian reinforcements arriving to Bakhmut on February 13th and 14th. That means Ukraine is pushing reserves into Bakhmut. They are not giving up this city. We have talked so much about the importance of Bakhmut and the Russian fixation on that city, and Ukraine knows it. They will not give it up. They will not give up the opportunity to bleed the Russian army dry. Note that all of these tanks sent as reinforcements into Bakhmut are Russian tanks captured by the Ukrainians, except for the one T-64, of course. And in this video we see the Ukrainian 2-7S Paya self-propelled howitzer in Bakhmut. This is one of the most heavy artillery pieces in use in the Ukrainian armed forces. The 203mm shell weighs about 110 kilograms and carry about 18 kilograms of explosives. It's an insanely huge weapon, and Ukraine has them ready in Bakhmut. Every sign shows that Ukraine will defend Bakhmut with teeth and nails. As per 17th of February, these are the Russian losses. About 800 Russian KIAs in the last 24 hours, and note the huge increase in artillery pieces. Immediately if Russians take on any offensive operation, they start losing artillery pieces because they're moving them closer to the front. They start to use them in a more mass scale, and immediately Ukraine starts to destroy them. We have 14 cruise missiles also because Russia recently launched a minor cruise missile attack against Ukrainian cities. About 36 missiles it was. Half of them were shot down. The other half were Kh-22 missiles, which Ukraine is not able to shoot down, but Russia has very limited stocks of these. Now, my friends, we're going to watch the Aidar battalion doing work around Bakhmut. Why I'm watching this battalion? Because I love the fact they have winter camo and their operations right now are happening in snow, and it resembles so much of my own infantry training when I was in the army.
Так, а яка куди беха їде? А похуй. 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 Пулемет.
So we can see how cramped the situation is inside of these infantry fighting vehicles. I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'4" or 194 centimeters, and I never got to ride in an infantry fighting vehicle because we didn't have them. Now the 2nd Brigade in Estonia is buying them, thank God. I only rode in the back of trucks, and that was cramped, so I can only imagine how cramped this is.
Так, а де наші?
Getting out under fire. See, they don't know if these trenches or these positions are held by the Russian forces. But they're occupying these positions. He kicked the Russian helmet with this. I guess the footage we're watching from comes from the machine gunner, because I saw the gun before. We gotta give credit to how heavy these weapons are and how much the entire gear weighs. And you can see he's running like a juggernaut, very slow movements, because it's incredibly difficult to run in this gear. You have to be in a very good shape. And also in snow it is much more difficult to run because you have no traction, it's slippery. So if I see these guys running with these weapons, it's already a feat of itself. Believe me, I've been there, it's difficult.
Трофейные кулеметики взяли.
Трофейный пулеметик means, I think, trophy machine guns. So these are Russian machine guns they just got.
РПГшечка. Дыры горят. На зв'язку.
Oh my god. Every time I watch infantry in snow, so much comes back to me. Most of my time was spent in the army during the snow times, and the snow just maximizes the difficulty of everything. The movement, you feel more weight on your shoulders, you have to be warmer, you have to wear warmer clothes, you have to eat more, it's colder to sleep. It's just multiple times more difficult in the snow. There has been a change in the Russian air doctrine in Ukraine. At the beginning months of war, they used a lot of aircraft and they lost a lot of aircraft, and then they switched to defensive air doctrine, which means that Russian choppers and planes don't fly into Ukrainian airspace. They shoot their payload before flying into the Ukrainian airspace and then they turn back. This doctrine has been changed now. A source very close to the Russian Ministry of Defense says that Russian aviation has decided to massively start using planes and choppers in the invasion again. There is a whole paper about this and I'll sum it up for you. Since the outbreak of war, Russia has retained about 80% of their aviation capability. British intelligence report that came out on 16th of February states that Russia right now has about 1,500 military aircraft, and losses during the war have amounted up to 130 aircraft. British military analysts have explained that Russia definitely has enough aircraft, but most likely there is a huge shortage of qualified pilots. Training pilots takes a lot of resources and time, which Russia doesn't have at the moment. Here's my take on the issues of Russian Air Force. First of all, lack of coordination with the ground forces. Coordination of Air Force with ground forces is an incredibly difficult thing to do. You need a very, very organized military system to be able to pull it off. The United States is unbelievably good at this. Russia, on the other hand, is unbelievably horrible at this. Their Air Force operates like a very much separated branch of military that doesn't connect with any other branches of military. That is a huge hindrance on the battlefield. The second issue in my eyes is lack of pilots. Russian pilots get about 50% of the training hours that NATO pilots get in 1 year, so their pilot quality is already poor before the war, and now a lot of their pilots have been killed in Ukraine. Training pilots is incredibly expensive and time-consuming, and Russia doesn't seem to prioritize this at the moment. The third issue with the Russian Air Force in Ukraine is the Ukrainian air defense. Russia failed to knock out the Ukrainian air defense systems at the first days of war. Yes, they did a lot of damage, but Ukrainian Air Force still existed and was very effective after the first days of war. And nowadays, Ukrainian anti-air capabilities are incredibly good, so dangerous to Russia that they really shouldn't fly in Ukraine. They will be shot down. Ever since the Ukrainian Air Force has HARM missiles, Russian anti-air capabilities are doomed. I personally do not see that Russia could use their air force effectively without carrying huge losses. Look out for increased aircraft losses in the Russian aviation in the future. This next video sums up the Wagner situation after they depleted their ammunition and human resources for Bakhmut and Soledar. Let's watch it.
Вас приветствует артиллерийское подразделение ЧВК «Вагнер». Каждый день мы выполняем сложные боевые задачи и прикрываем наши штурмовые группы. На данный момент мы полностью отрезаны от поставок боеприпасов. На данный момент острая нехватка боеприпасов для гаубиц, соответственно 152 мм Д1, Также для...
Recently, Prigozhin stated that they will no longer recruit prisoners because the Russian prisoner numbers have depleted themselves. And Wagner stormed itself bloody on the wall of Bakhmut. Wagner has lost about 50% of their unit's capabilities, and here we see they also lost about 50% of their ammunition, possibly. This is what Putin wants. Prigozhin has become a very powerful player in the Russian politics, and Putin likes to place his subjectives against each other. So as much as Wagner is losing power and manpower and capabilities in Ukraine, that is better for Putin, because Prigozhin might face a threat to him personally, taking over power. So if Wagner units are cut from ammunition supply, that means Putin wants to diminish their capabilities.
Противотанковые пушки МТ-12 100 мм осколочно-фугасные. Для танка Т-72 125 мм осколочно-фугасные. Также для 120-го миномета 2Б-11. Мы обращаемся к нашим коллегам и друзьям из Министерства обороны. Мы уверены, что где-то на складах эти боеприпасы есть, и мы в них остро нуждаемся. Мы будем крайне признательны, если вы окажете нам содействие, поможете нам и поставите эти боеприпасы. Огромное количество людей выживет и сможет продолжить успешно участвовать в боевых действиях. И это отразится на всем ходе войны. Мы отбатрачим за вас, сделаем эту работу. Помогите нам с боеприпасами.
As I explained, this video tells us a lot more than you can see and hear in this video. That shows us Wagner's relationship to Putin's power structure. There's a conflict there. Wagner is becoming too powerful, Prigozhin is becoming too powerful, so Putin is curbing their power by cutting them off from supply. And I think the fact that Wagner has depleted about 50% of their force to Bakhmut also plays into Putin's hands, who doesn't want a powerful Wagner in Russia. Marina Yankina, head of the financial department at Russian Ministry of Defense, was found dead. She fell out of a window. Her death is not a first among the Russian high-ranking officials lately. You won't believe this list, my friends. This is pure Beria and NKVD. Russians who know too much about Kremlin's finances or military secrets are starting to fall out of windows. I'm not kidding you. This is a pattern, it's not a one-time incident. Buckle your seatbelts. Here we go. Pavel Antonov, the richest deputy of State Duma, died in India, 26th of December. He fell out of a hotel's window where he was celebrating his birthday party. Antonov's companion Vladimir Bidenov was found dead in the same hotel 4 days prior to Antonov's death. Vladimir Makarov, a former deputy chief at Main Directorate of Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, was found dead. Alexei Maslov, the ex-chief of Russian ground forces, died in hospital on 25th of December. Alexander Buzakov died on 24th of December. He was the head of the Admiralty shipyards for 10 years. They produced submarines that shot Kinzhal missiles at Ukraine. Vladimir Sungorkin died in Russian Far East on 14th of September. He was editor-in-chief of a popular Russian propaganda media, Komsomolskaya Pravda. Vladislav Avayev was killed in Moscow. Police also found the bodies of his wife and daughter in the apartment. Avayev was the vice president of Gazprom Bank, third largest bank in Russia by assets. All right. Let's continue. Alexander Julyakov was found dead in Leninsky village on 25th of February. He was deputy general director of Gazprom's affiliate for corporate security. We're getting to the end of it. Leonid Shulman was found dead in Leninsky village, where Gazprom's top managers live. 13th of January. Shulman was the head of transport service of Gazprom Invest. And this list goes on, and these names are all very high up. We're not talking about some local decision makers or leaders. We're talking about state-level, high-ranking people falling out of windows one by one. That's how Putin does things. Now we're going back to PMC Wagner. We're watching an interview with Prigozhin, the head of Wagner. Prigozhin has been a very arrogant player in the Russian politics, but in this video, I see he has been humiliated a little bit.
Пожалуйста, на ваш взгляд, вот противник цепляется за Бахмут так упорно, это больше политический мотив или он смотрит именно в войну?
У него три мотива. Первый мотив, безусловно, политический. И прекрасно, что мы Бахмут так раскачали. Мы сделали из него новый Сталинград, новое Куликово поле, там, не знаю, Бородино, что, с чем сравнить. Это неплохо. Второй, конечно, военный мотив, потому что Бахмут – это такой хороший транспортно-логистический центр для ведения военных действий. Вот. И третье – это моральная составляющая войск. Ведь если Бахмут не падает, значит, моральная составляющая достаточно высокая. Ну, если они не окружены, зачем мы будем говорить, что они окружены? Противника тоже не нужно унижать в этом.
See, we shouldn't downplay the enemy in this. This is all Prigozhin has done. He has downplayed the Russian armed forces and the Ukrainian armed forces. And in this video, I see a humiliated Prigozhin because his Wagner force has lost about 50% of their entire capability, including ammunition. Their artillery units are lacking ammunition and they're cut from the Ministry of Defense supply chain. Prigozhin has been put in his place or is being put in his place as we speak. This is not the Prigozhin I've known in the last 6 months who is boasting about taking Ukrainian cities that have not even fallen yet.
Нельзя недооценивать.
Конечно,
Бежать впереди паровоза.
Абсолютно верно, да.
Когда получится окружить Бахмут? Вот ваши, если есть какие-то...
Ну, я только что ребята спрашивали, я думаю, что это март-апрель. Хотя за...
See, about 3 to 4 months ago, he said, we're gonna take Bakhmut in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Now he says it's 2 more months. Something happened to this guy. Somebody talked to him very seriously.
Загадывать очень сложно. Все зависит от того, как они будут активны. Они сейчас получают новые виды вооружения. 100% будем уничтожать эти леопарды. 100% разберемся, как их сжигать. Но это тоже важнейший факт.
To me, it feels like he's been humiliated or put in his place. Let's talk about peace. And here's my take on it. There are people, groups in EU and United States that promote the idea of peace between Ukraine and Russia. If you look at all the military conflicts that Russia has taken part in the last century, you notice a pattern. Russia has place for peace in their military doctrine, actually. It is for gathering strength to strike later. Russia only wants peace if they're doing extremely bad on the battlefield. In any conflict they've been in, they never accept peace or talk about peace if they are dominating on the battlefield. Then they take what they want. If they are failing on the battlefield, they suddenly start to talk about good intentions, goodwill gestures, peace. Anyone in the West talking about make peace, not war, or being pacifist and talking about ending this war and doing peace with any means should know that this plays right into Kremlin's doctrine. Russia needs peace right now to gather their force. They're doing extremely horrible, and a peace for them would be a great victory. They could gather their force, reevaluate their strategies, and then strike again. Western peacemakers and pacifists are a gift to a struggling Russia. Peace is a weapon used by Russia when they are doing bad and need to rethink their strategies and gather strengths. There should be no peace until Ukraine liberates all of their lands, including Crimea. This next video we're going to watch, I will not say anything about it. I'll not open up the context because I want you guys to see and feel what I felt when I first time watched this video. Get your popcorn.
Добрый день, уважаемые зрители. Мы сегодня этой акцией готовы показать, насколько русский народ сильный духом. Для нас не страшны ни ветер, ни мороз, ни холодная вода. Мы сегодня поддерживаем ребят, которые совершают подвиг во имя нашего Отечества. Сегодня они сражаются за наше светлое будущее. Многие помогают участникам специальной военной операции. Кто-то готовит окопные свечи, кто-то собирает гуманитарную помощь. А сегодня мы поддержим их своим вот этим подвигом обливания холодной водой и покажем, насколько нас, русский народ, непобедим, насколько мы сильны.
Russian young men are used like biomass. They're dying in hundreds in the trenches and cold of Ukraine. And this is how the Russian populace reacts. Oh my God. Okay. Let's go on. Moldova's parliament has approved the formation of a pro-Western parliament, led by a new prime minister, Rehi, amid continuing economic turmoil and allegations of Russian meddling. Moldova has a Russian separatist region called Transnistria, which shares a very long border with Western Ukraine. At the beginning of war, Russian plan was to create a land corridor between Crimea and mainland Russia, and then with the same one swoop connect Transnistria through Odessa, to then take Transnistria and Moldova along with Ukraine with one big blitzkrieg-style offensive. On February 10th, the last Prime Minister Natalia Gavrilita resigned, citing a lack of public support for her government. 2 days later, the Moldovan President Maia Sandu stated that Russians have been planning a coup in Moldova to change the legitimate power to an illegitimate pro-Russian power. Now that the pro-Western government has been appointed to office, this is a huge political loss to Russia. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas says this, and I quote, "I'm going to Munich Security Conference with 3 messages. 1. Ukraine must win and the aggressor must be defeated. 2. No Russian war crime against Ukraine will go unpunished. Grey areas in European security create instability and war. They must become a thing of the past. And I stand behind my Prime Minister's message. My friends, I now want to thank the patrons. I will read you 5 new patron names who are tier 10 and above. They keep this channel going, and they are making me able to do side projects that will not give in revenue to this channel but are connected to charity. And one of these projects are coming out very soon. Stay tuned for it. Keep an eye on my channel. But now the people responsible for this: Linette McLean, Boris Ekner, Edward Nielsen, Jerry Marsden, Ted. Thank you to each and every one of these people for supporting the channel. And if you like my channel, the Patreon link is in the description below. It is the fastest and easiest way to support. Or you can also use PayPal, also in the description below. Until my next video, my friends, Slava Ukraini.